Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Marshall. I'm going to be doing this one solo today because mainly I obviously want to do a podcast kind of to make sure, hey, we aren't dead. We're not going anywhere. Just obviously we're going through some issues in terms of just, it's mainly Franny trying to get through stuff with school, and for some reason, I've kind of kept myself with the excuse that I can't really record these without Franny, and I feel like the inevitable realization is that at some point, I think I just have to do it. So, unfortunately, one way or another, that's kind of where we're sitting at, but I am still recording this right now, and I plan to continue to, I'm going to make sure at least this one gets out. Then we do plan on recording actually coming up this week, so we will have more episodes coming out and everything else. I am still, in terms of content that we do have planned coming out in the near future here, I am still trying to get it to a point where I can continue to work on the episodes of Pokemon that we have come up. We actually, or of Moemon. We are also planning on recording episodes for Pokemon Sword. That one's going to be really fun to do, and I'm really excited to record that. We want to come out with those definitely as soon as possible. Moemon might be a little more sporadic in terms of when it comes out, but I am really hoping for that stuff to kind of become more consistent in the future with maybe a little more activity we've got going here. Otherwise, in terms of other pure natural one kind of business related things, I'm currently getting ready to help the Lake Geneva Museum, or the Geneva Lake Museum technically, but I was referring to the city in the whatever. So I'm helping the Geneva Lake Museum operate on, by the time this episode comes out, they will have made at least the public announcement for it. I am helping them with a Kickstarter for a D&D display or a exhibit, which is really great for a place that is like Lake Geneva. If you want to know more about like kind of Lake Geneva, and more importantly the game store that we have often frequented in our time, you can check out our video on Lake Geneva games. It's actually down below, or you can I'll put it in the description below, or I'll put a little card right up, actually it'll be up here. You can check that out, and then that's a great video. I put a lot of my heart and soul into it, and similarly, that is kind of something that this video is going to emulate. I think that's something that we really want to do. So part of what I actually plan to do is I do plan to actually take other parts of what they're going to be posting on their Kickstarter, and we're going to post it here as another episode of Origin Stories. So that's something we still want to plan on, but I don't think it's going to be the exact way that we originally intended it. So there's more things to work on that in the future, but I'm very excited for that project and what's going to come up with it, because that's going to look even better than I think than Origin Stories did. I think it's just going to have a different feel and a different look, and I'm really going to enjoy it because of just kind of different fun things that I have learned and I have kind of been able to and skills and actually really in tools that I've been able to attain since then. So I'm really excited for that, and I'm really looking forward to when that one comes out, which will be much later though. That isn't coming out super soon, so it's mainly just gonna have to be Let's Plays in these podcasts and the live shows to carry you over. That's another thing. It's a similar reason as to why we haven't had episodes of Embers by Daybreak in the last couple of weeks. And we will have an episode the day that this episode airs. We will be playing Embers by Daybreak. But again, just unfortunately, Franny has been struggling with time, and especially with him kind of being in a lot of heavy parts of the school year. College, is a bitch, and that's the way it is. So that's just kind of the lowdown of where we're at right now. I didn't want to talk about it too long because I wanted to actually get to the meat and bones of things that are RPG in the recent days, which is in fact I want to give I would say a light review. I want to give a light review on Pokemon Sword and Shield. So I haven't been able to play it much at all. I am definitely still in very much early playing stages, but there are a few things about it that I really like and I think that should be highlighted. And I want to kind of talk about maybe because Pokemon's a weird game. It's very hard to, I think, read a review for Pokemon and think like, is this game going to be it for me? Because Pokemon is very much a game that is continually going to either totally satisfy you or fail you one way or the other. There's just no there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. Like, you're inevitably going to love it or hate it, depending on if you already like it, right? And the big thing that I think a lot of people, obviously, and we've talked about this in the past, is we have talked about how the national dex affects people's mentalities. And granted, I am somebody that is, relatively upset. I spoiled the pokedex leaks and whatnot for myself because I just kind of wanted to know. A lot of times I don't worry about a lot of these spoilery things because I like to have somewhat of even though I'm not a journalist, I like to have a journalistic mindset about, the way I think about and I can talk about these games, right? A big thing that I like about what we do here on this show is, we can talk about things in a relatively objective manner. Obviously, there is no way you can be purely objective in any way, but at least I can be somewhat objective because of at least the experience that I have with games in this genre and a number of these games in terms of a series games like Pokemon. Obviously, I've been playing Pokemon since Pokemon Crystal when I was 6 back in 1999. How old was I when I was 6? No, it'd be closer to 2000. But it was right when Pokemon Crystal, which that didn't come out until the turn of the millennium, if I remember correctly. So double check the year here. Yep, 2000. So it probably, and I think it was really closer to 2001. So I was actually closer to when I was 7. But I believe it was closer to the summertime when I actually did get Pokemon Crystal. Because I do remember getting it, because I got it with a Game Boy, but I remember being warmer. But it might have been just because September was probably warmer where I grew up than it is now here in the upper Midwest. So that's the way that is, isn't it? But otherwise, yeah, like I've been playing Pokemon for a very long time, and that's the thing is the idea of this natural dex, or this lack of a natural Pokédex, or national Pokédex, is relatively new for a lot of people because, and granted, Game Freak and Nintendo have generally made ways to kind of get a national dex in many of the games. They through either the multiple game, certain game linkings, all that type of stuff, right? And I'm not just talking about like in generation. Like, I'm not talking about how you can collect all 150 Pokemon in Red and Blue. You had to either have a friend that has blue, or you'd have to own both red and blue. I'm not talking about that. I am talking about, kind of the ability to back and forwards trade between certain generations, or in the case of third gen, which is always my prime example for national dex kind of arguments, is that the only way to get all of the Pokemon in third gen was through if you owned Pokemon Coliseum or XD. The spawn of my joke of Pokemon Raw XD. I hate and love this image at the very same time, and I made it. I'm still recovering from a bit of sickness, so apologies. There's nobody over here, so it's okay for me to cough. But otherwise, cover yourself when you cough. So yeah, the big thing is, I think Pokemon is really hard then to please everybody. No matter what, though, now that there are so many Pokemon out there and so many generations have touched this game and have played and attached themselves to so many Pokemon, it's really hard to, kind of do what they did in Gen 3 now, because it's just a different audience and it's a greater audience. It's a lot harder to anger a wide fan base in 2004 than it is now. It's just, it was harder then. Like, it's way easier now because everybody has a voice. Social media exists, but that doesn't mean that you cater to everybody. I have consistently believed in for every game that I've ever played, especially in, long-standing, like long-term RPG like games, that you never compromise just for the sake of what the fans want. Now, I'm not referring to things like, doing practices that maybe are somewhat questionable, CEA, but like, I mean, making gameplay decisions and story decisions that you make because you want to make them. Game Freak decided that they did not want to focus on putting all 1,000 Pokemon, over like I think we are at what, like 802 or something like that now in terms of like total Pokemon count. Let's see, like total number of Pokemon here. We're at 802. It's insanity to put into a single game. It's a lot of coding. Like, at some point, Game Freak, a lot of the developers were probably just like, we've got to draw a line. Like, we can't do this. Like, these are people that are making these games, and everybody forgets this all the time. And these are people who are making these video games and are trying to, foster fan bases, and especially the reality you have to remember is that no matter what, this is going to be a game for kids, and these kids are not going to have the same nostalgic attachment to their favorite Pokemon. For example, when I was a kid, it didn't upset me that Umbreon, my favorite Pokemon at the time, was not available for me to get in Ruby and Sapphire, and as far as I knew, there was no chance of ever getting that in my Pokemon Ruby game. That just wasn't happening. And I was, upset and disappointed, but I wasn't so upset that like I, boycotted the game or, I thought less of the game. Like, it didn't impact my opinion of that generation. And as a result, I love that generation. It's a great generation. It fostered just different things. I played the game way more, I played the game way more. I don't want to say intimately, but I played the game in way more of a, I just played a more, I can't think of the word. I'm flubbing up, but I played it to a different degree than I did the first one, where I was just kind of running around with my Typhlosion, just trying to, Typhlosion or Feraligatr, because I kind of swapped at some point, and kind of flailing around trying to somehow stumble my way through the Elite Four with one Pokemon that necessarily maybe isn't the best one to do it. And that's the thing. Like, you don't know what you're doing when you're 6, but 2004 came around. Now all of a sudden I'm a bit older. So like now we're getting to that point where like, hey, well, I'm closer to 10 now. I'm thinking about what I'm the type of Pokemon I'm using, and I've learned things since I first played Pokemon Crystal. So now, it's so much different because, and that's the thing. And now because I played that game into a different degree, a more tense degree, like where like I really wanted to make things like the secret bases, I really wanted to get into everything in that game. And it just wasn't the same as it was for, it wasn't the same as it was for when I did play Crystal. Despite that, I look at that game way more nostalgically and with a little bit more admiration just because, of it being my first game. And that's the thing. No matter what, this is going to be somebody's first game. And the reality is that even just with what I have played so far, it's going to be the same thing that any other Pokemon is. And it is that it is a Pokemon game. Yes, have they added more tutorials? Have the rival fights become less intense? Yeah, but at the same time, that doesn't devalue the rest of the game. In fact, one of the smartest things I think they do is they finally have given a truly good use to the third Pokemon slot that like doesn't get taken. For example, in X and Y, I think that was one of the smartest ways to do the rivalry. It introduced the idea of a poor rival, almost like you are the rival concept, where your rival takes the weaker Pokemon to you. They did a great job of your true rival being the one that takes the one that's stronger, and then there's a secondary rival that picks the one that's weaker to you. I think that was a great way to do that. I don't know if they did that earlier or not, but because I didn't play between 3 and 7 or 3 and 6. So apologies, I don't really know if they did do that earlier, but that was something I always really liked. Now, what I love about this one is that it's way more of a long game. You're not going to think about the fact that, say, if you take Score Bunny, right, that Sobble is good. Sobble's final evolution is going to be greeting you at the very end, and it's a different type of rival, right? And I think it's a strong callback to the way Lance was, where he is kind of more of a consistent presence in the game, and that's, I think, really nice because it makes. And I like when they do that. I like when they consistently give you, kind of the champion. That was something I didn't like about Sun and Moon, was that kind of the last boss was, the professor. That kind of, I don't know. I don't know. It just was weird. It seemed like, I mean, it worked story-wise, but it was just one of those things where it was like he didn't feel like a champion. And to be fair, I believe they do kind of put into almost an explanation that he kind of seems like he has been conquering or really going into a lot of these Elite Four. So he's very clearly a very good trainer, and I think all of the professors generally are. But the thing that I really, it just threw me off with Sun and Moon because of just the fact that he didn't feel like a champion. He felt like your professor. So fighting him didn't have the same feel as fighting a grand champion like Lance or even Steven from Ruby and Sapphire, where you really get to kind of see him throughout the game and he's helping you and you're kind of seeing him, as a trainer. And, it's almost kind of mythical the way that they are, right? They seem really powerful. That's what I think they're trying to achieve with Lance. And am I calling him Lance? I just call him Lance. Leon. And I think that's a really great idea. So that's something I really like. I think no matter what, the reality of my soft review right now is that it's a Pokemon game. No matter what, if you like Pokemon, you will like this game, even if your favorite Pokemon is not in it. I was very upset that Mareep wasn't in this game. Obviously one of my other favorite Pokemon is Sylveon, and obviously Eevee is going to be in it. It's really easy to have an Eeveelution, but I have especially in the last few years, I don't know why, but I got an immense attachment to Mareep for some reason, and as a result of that, I really love. Because of the result of that, I was really upset. I love Wooloo, but I would have loved to have both sheep Pokemon. It would have been neato and fun. And there's a lot of Pokemon that I like that aren't in it. It's just the way it is. I would have loved to have the second gen starters again. I haven't been able to play with a 3D version of the second gen starters, which is really disappointing. And maybe they'll do a Let's Go version of second gen. That would be awesome. But that's just the thing. It's because it's not in it. It's disappointing. But the reality is, this is the reality that we live in, and it's that no matter what, Game Freak gets to make the decisions. And so, sure, am I disappointed that I don't get to use some of the Pokemon that I love? Absolutely. I think asking somebody to not be upset that their favorite Pokemon are in the game is inhuman. But to then take to a review and label it as bad, essentially just kind of because you're, for a poor choice of words, you're kind of just butthurt about the fact that you don't have your favorite Pokemon, and therefore the things that are problems are going to seem like more apparent problems, despite that this is a children's game. Of course it's going to be, hand-holdy, and it's going to be hand-holdy, it's going to have cutscenes out the wazoo that feel meaningless. Despite that, at least now you can skip them, unlike Sun and Moon. It's just, no matter what, it's not a perfect game. Absolutely not. If Pokemon wasn't Pokemon, if Sun and Moon was the first game and it just came out right now, it probably wouldn't get an amazing review. It probably would sit in the realm that a lot of truly children's, it probably would have done as well as about Yokai Watch. It's probably the reality. Yokai Watch didn't fail, but it obviously is nowhere near the success that Pokemon has had. So if it came out now, it probably would have had a similar, kind of response as Yokai Watch did now that Pokemon is around. Say things had flipped, that's something that's the reality. And it's just because people, as they grow up and as you look at as the standard of games have come up, if you are deciding to judge a Pokemon game based on what all of the other games that exist, for example, Jedi Fallen Order or all these other RPGs, you're going to be disappointed. And that's just because, it doesn't fit that standard, and that's fine. It shouldn't. But it's obviously they're going to do what they want to do. And to be honest, as long as you just enjoy Pokemon, you will enjoy this game. Like it just because it isn't fitting of the sim standards that the rest of the industry goes through, that even somewhat and Zelda itself even almost kind of redefined in a great way. Like sure, while they could try to find ways to redefine what our expectations are, at the same time they also can redefine what our expectations are by making us appreciate the Pokemon that we get when we get it. I think that's something that really is lost on a lot of things, is that we just kind of don't take the appreciation for like it's really easy to think of like this game as the knockoff, because like sure I can like sure the Pokemon are here, but blah 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 blah, like it's really, and that's the thing I've noticed, is like it feels like I think this results from an oversaturation of Pokemon available for you to get in the wild. Like it's hard to just know like what is where, like what Pokemon are where. That was my biggest problem with Sun and Moon, was that like I never knew where anything was. When you limit the amount of Pokemon in the game, you now can really fine tune just where Pokemon spawn, how they spawn. Like especially they're utilizing both the in the grass spawning and the live world spawning, and I think it's a great thing to do. Like I never felt more immediately inside of a world than when I played this Pokemon game, and like, or at least a Pokemon world, I should say. But since I played this one, and I immediately felt like I was looking at everything around me. Like it's what I initially felt when I played X and Y, and it's what I'm really excited about feeling in this one. So that's my kind of soft take on it. I spent longer on it than I kind of wanted to, but hey, that's what happens, when you don't have anybody else to reel you in. But otherwise, in terms of like other RPG like news, I don't know if I could necessarily say that Jedi Fallen Order, which came out on the same day as Pokemon last week, is an RPG. I don't think it is. But I don't believe that is what it's calling itself as. But at the same time, I don't really know what it is calling itself as. But in terms of tabletop RPG stuff, we are expecting very soon, this coming today, in fact. I should have talked about this more. But unfortunately, since we pre-record these episodes, we cannot. I unfortunately can't talk about any of my review of Eberron content for D&D. Unfortunately, I know. It's just because that's the price we pay with pre-recording. But you definitely will be able to see our. We will talk about it in next week's podcast, and I'm immediately, once I can get my hands on it, going to be starting a review. Starting up a review. We're going to start really reviewing content for Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm really excited about when we can do that. So I'm going to be starting that up the day it comes out, and we will hopefully have it up within the week. I'm super excited. I really love Eberron. It's something I've been very looking forward to, especially because I love playing the Artificer. I've had a weird relationship with the Artificer in this edition. The first time I ever heard Artificer was in 3.5, because that was when I started. And it was kind of in a weird way. I saw it in this. My friend had a couple PDFs of the book, and I was scrolling through different things because I was essentially looking for what was called the Duskblade. And inevitably I found that, but in my search for that and books that I think it would be found in, then I started seeing things about the Artificer and the idea. It was it was one of those things where it was hard for me to grasp, I think, at the time. I don't remember what book it initially came from, but then it came out. But then when I played Dungeons and Dragons Online, which is still around, I am so surprised. It that, I don't know, that game, it never matched the popularity of something like WoW, but yet is equally one of the most equally one of the longest standing MMOs that I think I have ever played or see still around. But yeah, then inevitably they came out with the Artificer and D&D Beyond, and I loved that class. I loved it. It was just so awesome. Like it was cool. You had the little mechanical dog. I love thematically like the use of crossbows and stuff, and RKO Tech is something I've always really enjoyed, and that's what I think is really kind of cool is the way that like the Artificer kind of bridges the gap between more of like a Victorian futuristic kind of setting and and the normal D&D realm. So I'm super excited for it to come into the 5th edition. Something that I think is very quickly beginning to move up in terms of the timeline, in terms of its theme. And I'm really excited for it to come out, especially because now that they have started to utilize more of the kind of gunsmithing aspect of Artificers, I think it's really cool. The one thing I think that I've talked about where I kind of miss is kind of the idea of the way the alchemist works in the Artificer kind of tree, and I think that's part of that is because as far as I used to see, at least in games like Pathfinder as well, like they would have like alchemists that would like essentially utilize like potions and chemicals to create attacks out of them, so always having like throwable potions and stuff that could be like bombs, or instead of that utilizing spells, because they could do spells that they could not just cast innately, and that was something I kind of enjoyed, which seemingly is kind of lacking in what we currently have for what the Artificer is. So that's kind of not something that I think I am looking, that's not something that that's something I wish maybe was a little more in terms of the older style, but everything else I have so far had a lot of fun playing. The Artillerist is one of the most interesting and potentially creative subclasses that I think the game has, honestly, because what I love is outside of maybe something like your homunculus or your whatever servant, like mechanical servant, or your iron defender, unlike those two things, which obviously maybe you want to do a lot of caretaking, you want to make sure they're fine. What I love about the Artillerist is it takes a similar concept, you summon a turret, but this thing is just like a different realm. Like you can inevitably, as it grows, like you can get it so that like you can essentially like scale, you can help you scale walls. You can make it a mounted turret somewhere. Like this thing has so many creative possibilities, and I love every aspect about it in so many ways. But I also love so many of the other classes. So like I'm really excited to see what actually comes out. Because I played the initial like gunsmith subclass that came out in the first Unearthed Arcana for Artificer, and I loved parts of it. I loved the Thunder Cannon itself. What I didn't love was what I kind of felt like was lacking was what exactly you could do to the Thunder Cannon to make it really scale well with you. It only scaled well in damage, but the problem was that like other classes would have like, because that's the thing, when you're part caster, you always will have to choose between whether or not you want to have a higher. Generally, at least, you will always have to choose between having like a higher casting ability or a higher like weapons and survival ability or whatever, right? Those are the things you always have to choose on. And one of the things that I really enjoyed, or that I would love to see more about when they do the gunsmith, is by dialing back the power of the Thunder Cannon, but then giving you more utilization into being better at using it. I think the Battlesmith is a great example where, obviously if you have a game where you can just instill firearms, I think then what you can inevitably do is, as the Battlesmith, you can make yourself better at shooting the weapon, and while the weapon itself gets certain buffs as you go up, like extra force damage and stuff like that, it doesn't get to this obscene damage count that the old Thunder Cannon would get to. So that's something I definitely am really hoping I would love to see come back, or at least come into a way, maybe into something other parts of the subclasses, but more importantly, I'm just really happy that there's another class coming to D&D, and I really hope that they start planning on getting more in. Really, the only two classes that we have seen even tested up to this point have been the Artificer and the Mystic. And honestly, I just don't think the Mystic is a realistic class to put into the game into one. It just I don't know, as far as we have been able to see from what the original one was, it just isn't real. It just isn't a viable option, I think, for any DM to want, unless you really want to have some crazy stuff happen in your games. I think it's just not viable to really have in your games, or it's just a really complicated thing to put in your games, and I don't think it's viable to really have as your only other class that you plan to put out. So I would love to see more classes come out in this edition. And I would like, because they've done really good job with subclasses, and I think the way that they've set up subclasses, it's really easy just to keep adding more and more and more, and that can kind of replace classes. But there are some things that just don't get replaced, that just aren't useful as a subclass. There are just some things that are just better done as a full-on class, and so I'd love to see more. I would love to see the creativity, because I've seen plenty of creativity in homebrew, and I would love to see more of like essentially taking some nods for some of these homebrews and just making them better and making them fit. That'd be really cool, and it's something that I would really enjoy to see, especially just kind of make, I think, D&D become a fuller experience. But otherwise, that's going to be it for this podcast. So I hope you all, since right now as while I'm recording this, and if you're watching this, then you have the ability to enjoy the Eberron adventure, and I don't, which is really sad for me. But hey, hopefully, if anything, then maybe you're enjoying Pokemon or any of the other great games that have been able to come out. Soon enough, we're going to be getting closer to when Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be coming out, and that's going to be really cool. And you can kind of have some fun with that if you want in real D&D right now with Baldur's Gate, which is really cool. So yeah, hopefully we're going to have some good content coming out in the near future here. We'll have more Moemon. We're going to have Pokemon Sword for the Let's Plays, and then if anything, maybe we will at some point be able to start back up with a little more of the streaming, but that's kind of a we'll see. I think the biggest thing is I really like just kind of being able to focus on getting the content in its best situation than worrying about having to stream and then figure out when I can edit outside of the actual work that I do. So since this is kind of just a side thing, I really don't want it to get in the way of the actual thing that helps me, not be homeless. So it's been great. I hope that you guys will enjoy this episode, and I hope you are enjoying any of our content. You can check out our channel out down below. Subscribe if you want, and we will see you guys next week, hopefully with Franny back here. Otherwise, I'm just going to be doing more of these solo podcasts if he is not available. All right. I'll see you guys later.